Hi, I'm Larry Magid, the CEO of Connect Safely, and we're the U.S. host of Safer Internet Day. And we're speaking today with Lynette Owens, who is the founder and global director of Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. Lynette, welcome.
Great to be here.
And why don't we start by talking a little bit about your program? What do you do, and what's its goal and mission, so to speak?
The goal of our program is actually to extend our corporate vision to the world's youngest citizens. And our corporate vision at Trend Micro is to make the world safe for the exchange of digital information. But it's primarily made up of advocacy and education and raising awareness among kids, parents, and teachers about how to be great at being online.
Now, I know you spend a lot of time in old days. You would actually go off and do events, and now they're probably all virtual. But you spend a lot of time talking with families, talking with parents, working with school groups and whatever. So, talk a little bit about those programs and not only what you do, but what you've learned from speaking with so many parents over the years.
That's a great question. And I would also say that we've learned something even, comparing before the pandemic and after the pandemic. One of the things that's been one of, I think, the biggest eye openers for me, especially doing a program that is international in scope, we are active in 27 countries now, is that while there may be different cultural nuances and maybe access to technology looks a little bit different, and maybe the favorite app or game looks a little different among kids and families around the world, the risks and the concerns, and also the ways in which kids have learned to rise above and use technology in positive ways are really a lot more similar than I would have originally thought. And so the benefit for our program is that a lot of what we talk about here, let's say in the United States, it translates, so to speak, quite well in other places. So that's one of the big learnings. The other thing is from a pre and post pandemic perspective,
Yeah.
I would say there are newer issues that have come up. I mean, there are still issues and concerns around kids spending too much time on devices that's not necessarily productive for them or healthy for them. The way they're interacting with each other, maybe there are some harmful or unhealthy relationships going on between and among kids online. And also the degree to which they may be more easily falling for things that they see online, whether that's a security risk, like clicking on a link that could actually be harmful for your computer, or believing a story that in fact is not based in any kinds of truth. And I think the difference, the thing that we've learned since the pandemic is everybody's online so much more that all of those risks have multiplied. The
Yeah.
risks on cybersecurity, the risks on interaction between people, and the risks to falling for misinformation.
Yeah, it's like driving a car. If you drive enough miles, you're increasing the chance of an accident. Doesn't mean you're driving any less safely. It's just the more time you spend doing anything, the more something could go wrong. And I'm glad you mentioned the misinformation part, because that's one problem that seems to plague both kids and adults. We dealt with after the election, we're dealing with the COVID-19. I'm seeing stuff about vaccines that scares me because it's in my interest that my neighbors take the vaccine. And if they choose not to based on misinformation, that increases my risk of getting COVID, even if I take it. So, I mean, what are we doing about that in terms of, or what are you doing in terms of educating people about misinformation?
Well, it's a great question, and it's one that I think we all have to ask ourselves as well, because I believe part of the answer, just like in fighting a pandemic, it takes all of us. Fighting misinformation online will take something from all of us. And what we're specifically doing at Trend Micro are a couple of things, because we've always believed that no matter what the risks are online, technology alone cannot be the answer. It needs to be coupled with educating the users of that technology as well. So, specific to misinformation, and by the way, we categorize all kinds of things under that very broad term, because misinformation could be somebody fooling you to click on an ad
Yes.
and give up personal information, and now you've put yourself at some kind of risk of cybercrime. Or it's just designed to mislead you for whatever reason, not designed to steal from you necessarily. And we've decided that from our researchers tracking what is going on to actually developing tools, one of which we just launched last November called Trend Micro Check, which is doing all of those things for you at one time. And using this tool, you're able to take a suspicious link or even a screenshot of a text you've received, send it to us, and we will in turn tell you, is it unsafe, meaning it's already known to be malicious from a cybercrime perspective, or it doesn't match up in terms of facts relative to some of the reputable fact-checking networks out
Right.
there. And so that's a couple of things that we're doing to fight misinformation.
That's so important. There's also a project called NewsGuard. It's actually a company that makes a browser extension that when you access a website, a news site, it gives you a scorecard based on its credibility. And I find that very helpful sometimes when I find a site that
Yes.
looks interesting, but I really don't know much about it.
Well, it's actually NewsGuard is part of the Trend Micro Check service. So
Oh,
we
good.
have plugged into their ratings. And so we'll either tell you if something is not safe because just clicking it is harmful to you, or if it's not been verified by fact checking network, or if it's the entire news organization is not reputable based on NewsGuard's red, yellow, and green rating
All right.
system.
Smart of you not to reinvent the wheel and rely on some people who have done a good job doing the research. Um, let's talk a little bit about basic security tips. I mean, I know that there are people who are very much in the weeds on security, but one of the things I like about you is that you are a parent. You can talk to parents, and just on a basic level, what are some of the things that we need to think about as adults and we need to think about if we're parents?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's funny because our messaging before the pandemic talked a lot about doing the basics, using strong password, changing them frequently, making sure that security software is on any device in your home or that your children use to connect to the internet, and finally, making sure that you teach your kids and encourage them to trust their instincts, because very many of them, if you ask them, have you ever seen something suspicious, and they'll often share lots of examples that they've
Mhm.
seen as a text message or a pop-up ad, and their first instinct is to ignore it and close out of it, X out of it, as they say. What's different with the pandemic now, when everybody home and sharing home networks that we're advising, are things like making sure the router in your home has a strong password and that you're treating it just like an app or a website. Change that password often, and separating your network so that anything that's has sensitive information on it, like your work laptop, is on the main part of that router. But children's devices that may not contain necessarily sensitive information might be put on the guest network.
Good.
And these are the kinds of advice that we started to give out over the last year almost now, knowing that so many more people were relying on the home network for everything.
And the other thing, when you think about the home network, if it's a PC or a phone, you can run Trend Micro or some other security software. My doorbell does not have a disk drive that allows me to put in updated software. I have to do that either through the app if there's an app, and it may not be, or making sure my router is secure so that that front door to my entire home internet is secure. So I'm glad you raised the issue of, and also updating your router, because often whoever made it may offer an app that can allow you to keep it up to date with new firmware. What about screen time? I know screen time is something we talk about a lot in our field, and there's been a variety of different types of advice which have varied over the years. The American Academy of Pediatrics, even a few years ago, loosened up and added more flexibility to their advice. But we're in a different world now with the pandemic. It's almost impossible not to spend a great deal of time in front of a screen.
It's virtually impossible, yes, and unless you don't want to be connected to anything and anyone
Yeah, go to
outside your
school, go to
home.
work, shop.
Yes, absolutely. And it's an interesting challenge because screen time, I think, is an oversimplified way of really trying to express concerns that are hiding, masking as other concerns for parents. In a pandemic, did you have to allow more screen time? You probably didn't have a choice if your children had to go to school in a remote fashion. So already the amount of screen time was going to go up in your children's lives. But the message that we've given to a lot of parents who struggle with this, mostly internally and mostly with the feelings of guilt, are that If you're making the choice to keep them home and safe and keep your community safe, and the rest of the time that they're spending while they're home is balanced with activities that are important for their physical health, their social and emotional health, and supporting them as learners. If there's time left over, it's okay to allow screen time for fun. What I really, really like over this past year or so are that within apps themselves, where parents don't have to invest in additional technology or software or products to limit screen time, I think the apps themselves and devices themselves are now enabling these kinds of tools inside those products.
Yeah.
An example of this is Apple's iOS screen time. I know a lot of parents who weren't aware of it and others who started to begin using it. But this is a great way to say, I think it's okay for you to use X game for a certain amount of time. But after that period of time, it'd be good if you and I have a conversation about whether we should extend it or not, and making sure that all of those other activities in your day have not um, been sacrificed because you're doing, you know, this game instead.
And for parents to understand that if a kid's in the middle of a computer game, it's no different than a kid being in the middle of a soccer game or any other sport. You can't just pull them off the field randomly. You've got to make sure that the game is over and maybe think, or at least you figured out a time in advance. So, because there may be teammates or opponents who are affected by the child simply leaving arbitrarily. So, try to be a little bit respectful of what your kid's doing. Lynette, you have a video contest, which I've been involved as a judge. It's been a great honor to and fun to judge these videos over the last several years. Tell us a little bit about your What's Your Story program.
The What's Your Story program is actually a way for us to give space to young people and allow them to share with us their views, their concerns, their hopes, and their dreams about making the internet a better place. So, founded in 2010 in the United States and now running in over a dozen countries around the world, we've been running this contest as a way to give them that platform.
So, Lynette, as I mentioned earlier, I've had a chance to be a judge, and I love some of the videos. Some of them, whether you enter or not, whether you're a kid or an adult, they're really wonderful to look at. And of course, people may be interested in learning more about how they can enter, whether this year or next year. So, what is the web address that you can go to get everything you need to know, and including watching the videos?
The place that people should visit is what'syourstory.trendmicro.com.
Lynette, I'd love to chat more, but we need to wrap up. Tell us how people can get a hold of you or your information and, learn more about your program.
Visit us at internetsafety.trendmicro.com, and they can find lots of resources. They can also find information about the parent sessions that we're hosting throughout the nation and throughout the coming months. And finally, they can reach me personally on Twitter at Lynette T. Owens.
Lynette Owens, the founder and director of the Trend Micro Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.